When I talk about normal, we're talking about Fire Knight normal here, because very clearly I am not normal. Hello everyone, Bront, CatHerder here. We're having some fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and we are here on the Free to Pause account. We are going to talk about Fire Knight Normal, because Fire Knight Normal is probably one of the most involved basic dungeons. And by basic dungeons, I'm talking about Spider, I'm talking about Dragon, I'm talking about Ice Golem, and of course, Fire Knight. Fire Knight is one of the more powerful dungeons. You get Savage Gear from it, which is top tier. You get Stun Gear, which is very, very helpful in, honestly, for up into the end game. Very good for a lot of champions to get them in stun gear, helps you with some wave control. And regeneration gear is a lifeblood of a lot of accounts, both faction wars all the way up through Hydra builds, and generally in just keeping your champions alive up until you're able to keep them alive without needing regeneration gear. But there's plenty of champions that are end game builds in regeneration gear, so it is top tier as well. So 3 of the best end game sets still in the game today. Now, yes, some of them have been power crept a little bit, but for an early game account, Fire Knight is probably the best dungeon to farm. Yes, Dragon has speed. Speed is a great set, but lifesteal falls off pretty quickly, so you could certainly do better than getting a lot of lifesteal gear. You will slowly but surely not need a lot of lifesteal gear as your account progresses. I rarely used it on the free-to-play account. In fact, accuracy gear gets power crept very easily by perception gear, and if you push faction wars, you can get perception gear pretty readily to where you don't need a lot of accuracy gear. And most of the rest of the sets are just not particularly great in Dragon. Ice Golem's got a couple of really good sets. You've got your Reflex, you've got your Counterattack, your Revenge, I think it's what it's called, and you've got your Cursed set. But honestly, those are kind of like endgame sets for Hydra, so they're not necessarily the type of things you want early. And the Ice Golem, while a fairly simple boss, is definitely frustrating. But Fire Knight has many things that make it difficult for people to attack early on because of the shield mechanic, because of the fact the boss heals himself, because of some of the way he does damage and his big smacks. So let's take a look at Fire Knight and see what are some of the best strategies for attacking the Fire Knight. So as we can see here on my free-to-play, I've managed to get a 4-minute and 30-second team as my best time for about 136 turns. That's pretty good. Honestly, most of the time it takes about 6 minutes. The runs are slowly but surely getting better as I improve my team overall, but Fire Knight is not one of the ones that you speed farm very quickly until very late in the game. And the normal and the hard are very, very different mechanics, because you can control turn meter of the boss easily on normal, whereas hard, you need to use freeze instead of regular turn meter control, which changes a lot of the champions that you use. So keep that in mind, that your Fire Knight hard team is going to probably be very different from your Fire Knight normal team, even going to hard 1. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the team and see what we've built with it for, and then we'll talk about some of the key components on any Fire Knight team. So this is my team right here, and it's not quite the conventional team I would like to make, but it's the best team that I can do on my free-to-play at the moment. And we're going to talk about best case scenarios, as well as good usable champions that are both very free-to-play accessible, as well as some of the more end-game champions you might want to use. First of all, the big mechanics of the Fire Knight is in the boss guide right here. You can certainly read this stuff, but what he has, which I don't know if that actually goes into details, is the Fire Knight has a shield that requires a certain number of hits for you to get through, and once he takes a turn, he refreshes that number of hits all the way back to the maximum number. And until that shield is down, you cannot place debuffs on him, you cannot decrease his turn meter, and you can barely damage him. Now, you can actually still damage him, so you can do damage through the shield, and damage through the shield is better than nothing. You'd really want to get that shield down, because then you can start getting debuffs on him, then you can start getting turn meter decrease on him, and that's how you bring him down really quickly. So with that in mind, speed is super important, because you want this boss taking as few turns as possible. So you want ways to increase your own speed, you want ways to increase your own turn meter, and you want ways to decrease his turn meter and decrease his speed. So if we look at that, that's some of the concept of this team right here. Tagore has increased speed. He also brings some healing, because this boss is tough, so I need to make sure I have some healing, and I've got an emergency revive there as well. Very, very helpful. We've got Geomancer here. Geomancer is here for his turn meter steal on that A3. He also has a single hit A1. In fact, that's something worth noting too. Tagore has a 2-hit A1, which means his A1 is going to hit twice, which is 2 ticks off the shield. That's why multi-hitters are very important. That is the number of hits, not the number of attacks. So Tagore can take 2 of them with his A1. Geomancer only has single target attacks, and his burn is not an attack. But with a recent AI update, he will do that burn only when the shield is down, making him actually one of the smarter champions here, which is great, because that means he will always get that burn to control turn meter if he gets a turn once the shield is down. Alice is actually really, really good in here because Alice's A1 is a double or triple hitter. And I say it's a double or triple hitter because it is a triple hitter after the first turn the boss takes, because once the boss has any skill on cooldown, it will be a triple hitter, and the boss will always have a skill on cooldown after its first turn. She also has a really, really big hitting A3, but I've actually turned that off against the boss because her A2, since the patch has now fixed it, has turn meter decrease as well. So that turn meter decrease is better for keeping the boss in check than the A3 additional damage. Plus, I'd rather have that triple hitter most of the time than the single hitter Big Duke, because the single hitter Big Nuke into the shield is kind of a waste. So we turn off her A2 at the boss, and I'll show you the tunes a little bit later on this. Coldheart is a staple of a lot of these teams because she has one of the best AIs for this boss. So you turn off her A2 against the boss and leave her unprogrammed. She, just like Geomancer, will only do her Heartseeker, which is the turn meter control that you want, and the big hit. She'll only do it against the boss when the shield is down. And otherwise, she has a quad hitter A1, which makes her absolutely amazing for bringing the shield down. You'll also notice she has Phantom Touch here. Phantom Touch is really good at bringing down the shield as well, because Phantom Touch procs count as an additional hit. Sometimes so do War Master hits, so War Master can be very helpful as well as some of these champions. I'm actually not 100% sure if War Master counts or not for this shield. I know it does count in other dungeons as a hit in some cases, such as the Sand Up. And finally, Ugo. Well, Ugo only brings the single hit, but she does bring a cleanse, which can be very helpful because this boss can put decreased speed on you as well. So it's nice to be able to cleanse that. It's nice to have additional healing. And she also has decreased defense, which is one of the ways you can not only plow through the waves, but eventually plow through the boss, because decreasing his defense makes it a lot easier overall. So this is kind of what we're looking at with the champion. So one of the things I like to count is I like to count A1 proc hits just to see if we're going to get through the shield. Now, I believe at this stage, the shield needs 12 hits. So Tagore gets you 2, Geomancer gets you 1, Alice gets you 2 or 3, so we'll count this as 3 for now, but you do have to understand that the first one's going to be 2. So we are at 6 hits already. We get 10 hits from Coldheart, possibly an 11th with that proc, and then you get a 12th hit or an 11th hit from Ugo, which means that we almost have the shield down with just one rotation of our champions. But of course, we want to do more than that. So increased speed is certainly going to be helpful to get us a second time to hit, but somebody will eventually break through the shield, hopefully giving a couple of these champions with turn meter control a chance to get turn meter control in the shield. Ideally, you would also like to get decreased speed on the boss as well, because that is very effective in making sure the boss takes fewer and fewer turns. 30% decreased speed is a huge, huge thing for the Fire Knight. I don't have decreased speed on this account, or at least on any of these champions here. However, this is where, for example, one of my earlier teams had Bowsmith Flannan on. Bowsmith Flannan does decrease speed and has a turn meter decrease and a double hitter on his A1. So Bowsmith Flannan, very, very good for this as well. So ally attack is also another way to attack the shield, because the ally attack brings everybody's A1s in, or at least some people's extra A1s in. So it's a number of additional hits beyond the ally attackers to get through the shield. This is why on the end game, when you're talking about hard, when you're looking at hard 10, when you need 21 hits to get through the shield, you're looking at 1 or 2 ally attackers, because it's just ridiculously hard for a single round of attacks to get 21 attacks with 5 champions. That's averaging more than 4 hits per attack, and you just don't do that. So what are we going to build? How are we going to build it? How are we going to program it? Well, let's take a look at how I have this team programmed first. Okay, so this team is probably not the best example of how to program a team, because I know that this team is not always going to get the shield down on the first attack, so I don't have a lot of stuff programmed in round 2. But assuming I knew that I was going to get in and be able to get the shield down immediately and had this timed right, what I would be doing is I would be focusing certain abilities on round 2 and not using them. So for example, if I was worried about this Quicksand 100% grasp, I might turn this off. Now, the reason I don't have this turned off on him is because this is helpful getting through the waves, and I'm still working on getting through the waves at a reasonable speed, and because this is a 3-turn cooldown, and I know that on the boss I'm going to be A1ing first, I know that the worst case scenario is this will be on 1-turn cooldown by the time I get a chance to get to it the second hit around. And I don't know if the shield's going to be guaranteed to be down at that point in time, so I'm willing to wait. Same thing with Cold Heart here. Cold Heart, I could save her Heartseeker so that I know that it's going to be ready in round 3. And in cases of where I know I'm blowing through the bosses or blowing through the waves, I absolutely would do that. So if I had better wave clear on this team, so if I had like a Seer, for example, to get me through wave 1 and wave 2 very easily, I would turn off Heartseeker here so that I could then use it on round 3. On round 3, you generally want to program most of your champions to lead off with their A1. And that is very important because if I didn't program Ugo to do that A1, I might instead waste this decreased defense against the shield on the very first hit. And that's not going to be very helpful because I want to land that when the shield is down if possible. Now, Ugo is not going to manage that perfectly well just on auto, but I don't have a good way to program that to make sure that it always goes on the right time. So for the most part, I let Ugo do what Ugo needs to do. She'll cleanse when she needs to and heal when she needs to. Otherwise, she'll do this. And when not in doubt, she'll then A1 afterwards. Alice, as we mentioned before, I've turned off her A3 Queenslayer, which does hit really hard, but this has turn meter control, and the turn meter control is very important. But we've led off with the A1 because I want to make sure I get through the shield as much as possible on the first hit. As I mentioned, Geomancer, he's got that A1 start, and the same thing here, Tagore has got the A1 here as well. Now, in general, I want to prioritize this skill over his revive because I want to make sure we're getting the increased speed out most of the time. And then this revive and the shield, kind of nice to have when we can get them out. And yes, it does mean that there's occasionally times when people are dead and he could revive them, but he'll instead do this. I'm willing to live with that because most of the time I'm hoping people aren't dead in the first place. And this is the type of skill that keeps people alive. So that's kind of how you're going to set up some of these teams. But what are some of the champions that you might look for this, and why might they be really good in Fire Knight? First of all, I want to highlight one of the free champions that is available that is absolutely amazing in Fire Knight, and I think is very, very underrated in Fire Knight, and that is Scylla the Drakes. Why is Scylla the Drake so good? Well, in addition to this AoE stun that's great for the wave control while you're getting into the boss, and if you're stunning the waves, that means they're not doing damage to you, and that generally means you can kill them faster. It also helps lock out the skills. If they have skills on cooldown and they're on stun, they don't get those cooldowns back, so that is very, very powerful. She has a revive in case you need an emergency bailout because somebody dies, because it is quite possible, especially with somebody like a squishy Cold Heart, to have somebody die regularly on the waves. But finally, against the boss, she has decreased speed and decreased turn meter. Now, it's only a 20% chance, bookable to 40, of decreased speed, and a 50% chance, if you book it, of that turn meter. But it is still a chance at turn meter and decreased speed, making her very powerful against the Fire Knight, because that's actually one debuff that's very important, and one thing that's very important in that decrease in the turn meter. So, are there better champions than Syl? Oh, absolutely. If you don't need Syl on your team, it's great to not have her. But for an early progression, especially on Fire Knight 25, where it is Spirit Affinity, so she's the positive affinity for it, having this ideally booked up can be a game changer. The other word trick with her is what you can do is you can set her A2, which you don't really need against the boss, as her first attack for the first round. If she has it up, she will do a double hitter for the first round, which is nice, better than a single hit on that A1. So that gives you a secondary hit on the A1, and then you turn it off. So either you have it and you get a second hit on the first attack, or you don't, and you don't. It's not really a big deal either way, because one extra hit shouldn't make or break your run. Maybe it does. If it does, then you're going to need to worry about that on the waves. But in general, she's a very, very good Fire Knight normal champion, at least for progression, until you can finally get her out of your team. Deacon Armstrong is one of the GOATs for Fire Knight because, well, he's a GOAT everywhere. He's just absolutely awesome. But what he gives you is he gives you this speed aura, which is absolutely amazing. Works perfectly in this dungeon, so it's definitely a win to use the speed aura because, again, this fight is all about going fast, going first, and preventing the enemy from taking a turn. So This helps a ton if you got a Deacon Armstrong. Plus, he's got a turn meter fill of your allies and a decreased turn meter on the enemy. One of the things about the Fire Knight is you can boost your own turn meter all you want, but if you don't decrease the turn meter of your enemy on occasion, eventually your enemy is going to go. It's just how the game works and how turn meter works. It is very hard to get nearly infinite turns on just turn meter boost alone. Now, there's a couple champions that can do that, but we're talking Void legendaries, so not going to be helpful for what we're kind of looking for doing Fire Knight normal. So this is absolutely amazing. Plus, because this is an extra turn on a 3-turn cooldown, this is effectively on a 2-turn cooldown. So this is every other turn, you're getting a 30% turn meter swing by decreasing the enemy's turn meter by 15% and increasing all of yours by 15%. Plus, he's got this decreased defense, absolutely amazing, but he also has a double hitter A1 that places leech. So one of the things that can be a problem against the Fire Knight is keeping people healed. That's one of the reasons I do like Syl. Syl brings a lot of passive healing, but Deacon is also great as well because this leech gives you some passive healing against the boss while you're hitting him and doing damage. So as long as you can land this leech with this double hitter, and to be fair, you'll have plenty of chances because ideally you want a Deacon Armstrong that is very fast, going fast and pushing everybody else's turn meter forward, and there you can get a leech and you get the double hitter. He works great for a progressing account if you're looking to progress yourself through Fire Knight. It wouldn't be a Fire Knight video if I didn't talk about Allure. Allure is absolutely amazing because she has a triple hit A1 that decreases target's turn meter by 25% on each hit. So that is a 75% turn meter decrease. It is cut in half against hard, but if you get her going fast enough, she by herself can keep the Fire Knight from taking a turn. More likely, it will be her combined with just a few other little things you have here and there, especially if you can get decreased speed on the boss, and then you've got the boss controlled. So Allure is absolutely amazing. She does have other things for the wave clear that's nice. She's got a decreased defense. It's a small version, but it's better than nothing, and it's an AoE as well. This does some damage, but honestly, most of the time I just turn this off because either I want the turn meter control or I want this decreased defense and possibly sleep. Very, very good overall. Accuracy and faction crypts is not really going to help you. But if you need an aura, you can certainly do better, worse than her. She's also a very good champion to have just for breaking through the shield on some of the harder levels as well because of that triple hitter. But again, the turn meter control is really what makes Allure's kit stand out for Fire Knight. She is an amazing Fire Knight specialist. Even on bad affinities, this is still a very powerful ability. Ruella is another great Fire Knight champion. She's actually a good affinity for both 20, 24, and 25 because 20 and 24 are Force and she is Spirit, and then 25 is Spirit. So she's got the triple hit A1 that steals 5% of the target's turn meter, so it is not the Allure 25, so it's not quite as good as Allure, but it's a triple hitter and it's still stealing turn meter, which means that she's getting extra turn meter so she can go a little bit faster, and the target is losing a little bit of turn meter. So overall, pretty nice. You definitely do need to book this up because the 80% chance is not greatly reliable, but she has other cool abilities as well. She brings decreased defense, weaken, and decrease speed. If you can ideally just do this once and never do it again, that would be great. That's certainly a little bit harder to do, so you're probably going to have her on a bit of a rotation. That will definitely slow things down. It really does depend on how much decreased speed you need and some of these other debuffs as well. But very, very good champion for Fire Knight with these two abilities, but it even gets better because she has a turn meter boost by 20% on her A3 as well. So this is another good way to get everybody else going faster as well, is to use this ability. So once you can book her, she can be a very, very good Fire Knight champion with all three of these abilities. And to be fair, because of these debuffs, she can actually be very good even on Fire Knight hard, because even without the turn meter control, the decreased speed, weaken, and decreased defense are going to be very, very heavy contributors to speeding up your runs in Fire Knight hard. Plus, she actually has an accuracy battle in dungeon. So if you're struggling to hit accuracy, particularly on like her, if you need to build her with high accuracy, high crit rate, and high speed, which to be fair, you do need to build Allure with crit rate. Do make sure you do build Allure with crit rate. This makes it a little bit easier for you to build early on. Extra accuracy, always helpful. I mentioned for rares, Bowsmith Flannan is absolutely amazing. He's got a double hitter with turn meter control. It's a 50% turn meter control, even if it's only 5%. It is 10% if they're under decreased speed as well. So usable, it's 10 to 20% turn meter. It's not the greatest, but it's decent. And again, if you're using the rare, you're probably talking about floor 20, not floor 25. He's also bad affinity for 25, so he's more of a progression through normal than he would be an endgame normal champion, but still very, very good rare. He does have decreased speed, even if it is the little one, but because this is an AoE decreased speed, that's also useful against the waves. Plus, he gets an extra turn occasionally if he puts 3 of these out there in the waves. Very, very helpful. Finally, he has a 4-turn ally attack with him and 1 other champion. This is basically his 2 hits plus somebody else's A1. And since you never know which one it's going to be, it's effectively 1 extra hit. But since his A1 is actually going to help with the turn meter control as well, it becomes a very, very effective ally attack, even if it's just him and 1 other person. Plus, you get increased accuracy on all your champions, can be very, very helpful early on in getting your team ready. Just to highlight another rare that can be very, very helpful with Fire Knight, we have Prosecutor here. Prosecutor has a 2-hitter that has a turn meter 10%. It's only a 20% bookable to 30%, so it's not quite as good as Flannan's, although Flannan's also has to have decreased speed to be the 10%, but it's there, so it's certainly something. But she has the big version of decreased speed, and that's on a 3-turn cooldown. It is an AoE as well, very, very helpful for the waves. And she does have a triple hitter here with heal reduction. One of the things the boss does is the boss does heal when he brings his shield back sometimes. So having heal reduction on the boss can actually be very beneficial as well. So she's got a very good kit for early access Fire Knight as well, if you're looking for ways to get through the shield. Apothecary here, one of the OG goats for Fire Knight as well, gives you the increased speed on your team and turn meter fill by 15% on a 3-turn cooldown, so he keeps you spinning very well. Plus he has a triple hitter on that A1. If you're worried about healing, he does have some heal, and this heal can be critical. It's one of the few that can be critical in the entire game. It's a very chunky heal. That said, against the boss, you're hoping you're not going to need that heal as much. So against the boss, you're probably going to turn that off and rely on this 3 times at random, because 3 times at random is 3 hits against the shield on an A1, and you're going to make him as fast as possible as well. So Apothecary, another very, very good champion. Depending on where you're at in the game, at day 270, you get a Vizix the Unbowed. Vizix is also very, very good against the Fire Knight. She's got a double hitter that basically is a turn meter steal. It's not worded as a steal. It's worded as she drops turn meter and then fills her turn meter with the amount the target lost, but that's a steal in any way, shape, or form. So she's got a double hitter with a 15% turn meter steal effectively. Again, it's halved against the boss above 20, but again, very good. Double hitter and turn meter control makes her very, very good, very viable, and she's a free champion. On top of that, you do get decreased speed on her A2 here with a 3-turn cooldown. So you need to get through and get some decreased speed on the boss. This is a great way to do it. And we've talked about Geomancer, why he's good already when I was talking about my team. Same with Coldheart. They give you the turn meter decrease or turn meter steal, as well as, in Coldheart's case, a multi-hit A1 and AI that's already programmed for the boss. Just one final champion I do want to highlight because he was a fairly recent fusion. Thor is actually really good against the Fire Knight as well. Thor's A1 has a chance of repeating it, so he can actually get more than double hits, and then each hit decreases the target's turn meter by 10%. So if you're kind of struggling and you did the Thor fusion, well, Thor is a great way to move into Fire Knight. He also brings you a lot of good wave clear, so he can be very, very helpful with the wave clear early on. Plus, he does bring decreased speed as well, very, very helpful against the boss. Plus, he hits very hard. That's another reason you might want to bring a Coldheart, for example. Overall, you are probably better off going with a team that's going to lock out the Fire Knight and keep the shield down than you are with a team that's going to fast nuke the boss. Because if you lose control of the Fire Knight's shield, it's very easy to die and have a cascade. Because once a couple of champions die, then you struggle to get through the shield, then you might not be able to pick everybody up, and by the time you do pick people up, maybe they don't have enough health anyway to survive his big nuke again, and it kind of spirals down from there. So being able to keep the turn meter control on the Fire Knight, probably more important than doing damage, but Thor is great for doing some of that damage. There's several other champions that can be good as well. This is just a bit of a smattering. Actually, one final champion I do want to talk about from a free-to-play accessibility standpoint is Morad's Bronzelock. She is absolutely amazing because she has a ally attack with 2 random allies on a 4-turn cooldown and grants an extra turn if it's killed. Obviously, you're not going to be killing the Fire Knight and then needing the extra turn, but it is effectively a 3-person attack. Again, ally attack is a great way to get a bunch of extra hits on the boss. You've got a double hitter with her as well, so you're going to get 2 hits plus 2 other champions A1s. That can help you get through the shield pretty easily. Plus, if you've got champions like Allure, Thor, Ruella, anybody with decreased turn meter on the A1, anytime they get in an ally attack, they could possibly do their decreased turn meter with their A1 on that ally attack as well. And that's why ally attack is so, so important on Fire Knight. And Morag gives you some additional damage and wave clear, and that makes it very easy to get through to the boss in the first place. Plus, she has a chance to do some counterattacking, so if the boss gets up the shield, you'll have Strengthen up, and she'll counterattack people while she's under Strengthen as well, which can give you 2 extra free hits on the shield. So that is my early game strategy guide for taking down the Fire Knight. Fire Knight is definitely worth farming. It's one of the few dungeons that I think has kind of retained its value in the day where there's so many other Doom Tower kits and other content where you can get better gear, 9-piece sets, all kinds of power creep with the gear. But the Fire Knight seems to be a very good place to get good gear that will be great early and still retain some of its value later on. So don't ignore the Fire Knight. Go ahead and farm it, and hopefully this video has been helpful in making a Fire Knight team. So if you like the video, hit like, smash that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Leave some comments down below. What champions do you use in Fire Knight? Maybe you can inspire somebody else, or maybe if you're having trouble, maybe somebody else can actually help you build a team if you post a few champions down below. If you have any other questions, you can certainly hit me up in Discord as well. And if you want a specific team guide in Fire Knight, let me know. Maybe I'll get a chance to build a video for it as well. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate your requests. You guys are absolutely awesome. Have a wonderful day. And until the next video, I'm Bront CatHerder.